Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I have been a master gardener since 2004. Along with all of that, I am an interior decorator and recently have retired from that practice, continue to dabble a little bit, but mostly I'm retired and enjoy my newfound time gardening and whatnot. Tonight, we're going to talk about succulents. And succulents are something that, years ago, I've been gardening for all of my life, but years ago, I didn't care for them because they didn't require as much nurturing. I think I garden because I do like that nurturing part of working with plants, taking care of them, watching them grow. It's just like a child. And and succulents are just that much easier. But then I discovered some other joys of which I'm going to share with you now. So I'm going to go right into sharing our screen and get into the program because it is a full program, but I hope to share with you everything you'll want to know about um, raising succulents. So I just want to make sure that I'm not in the program mode, am I? Let's see, I gotta get my screen down a little bit. Play. Okay. All right, here we go. Stunning succulents. We're going to be talking tonight about the cultivation and inspiration of succulents. First, we'll talk a little bit about what are they. Well, succulents are normally native to arid climates, but you will find some that grow in the tropics. Succulents store water in their leaves and stems as reserves, and that is why they are so low maintenance. I have the word juicy in quotes there or parentheses because succulents actually in Latin means juicy. Also, succulents offer a wide range of shapes and colors, and they are very slow growing and especially suitable as houseplants. So succulents can be grown outside, and this is actually a photo of a garden I had taken in Spain in 2019 when I had traveled there. Interesting, what I'm not comparing it to is another garden that was right alongside it that was much more formal and what you would think of as a Mediterranean garden. But here you have succulents growing in this dry environment, and the reason that not all succulents grow well in our area is that most of them, as we say, are intended for warmer environments, and we're in zone 5B. So that means we have a few that are available to us to grow outdoors, but most of them make wonderful indoor houseplants. And so that is going to be the focus of our talk this evening. I have to get rid of my little thing here because I can't see my plans. I just have to get rid of the little chat. No, it's not going to go up. Okay. Well, anyway, succulent comes from the Latin word succi, meaning juice, and the cells are made up in such a way that they can store water in their leaves and their stems. Their plants are fleshy and thick, and they're usually found in dry climates, but you will see that not all of them do, as I just mentioned. And cacti are part of the succulents family, but not all succulents are cacti. So why do we love succulents, or why do I love succulents? Ease of maintenance. I'm all grown up now and I have a lot of houseplants. They all enjoy a nice summer outdoors, but every window that we have just about is filled with some sort of plant growing in there. So they are easy to maintain, but they're also easy to propagate. So you get lots of freebies to share with friends and to increase your own succulent garden. Because they grow in such a slow rate, they're great for container gardens. They really, really respond well to sunlight, and therefore they make colorful mosaics. And when they are in flower, their flowers are incredible. Brilliant hues of corals and yellows and reds and very, very bright. So the types of succulents that are out there and available in the big world are Echeveria, Crassula, sedum, cacti, sempervivum, and aloe. And I'm going to break that down for us. Here you see a variety of succulents. You're seeing on the left, you're seeing a Christmas cactus. And a Christmas cactus is actually one of the cactuses that are grown in the tropics. They actually do not like a lot of sun. They tend to grow in the understory of the forest. And excuse me, but they still do store water in their leaves and in their stems. So very much a succulent. Then you have an echeveria, the second one in, cacti in bloom, and then cressula, which is also you probably are familiar as a jade plant. So here you can see some various looks of an echeveria. They do take on different forms, from the ruffled one on the left that I coveted for so long, but now enjoy in one of my own dish gardens. You will see that they basically have this rosette shape with all the leaves surrounding a center stem. And they do offer wonderful flowers, and also lots of subsets of flowers. Here you can see a few visuals of various cacti. I don't know whether you know it or not, but of course cacti, their water is stored in the inside of the cactus, and that does help them survive in the dry desert conditions. But their spikes are actually part of their nature and are put forth by the plant to keep predators from actually getting into the succulents and taking their water from them. Very important that they have their water. So they do anything to protect themselves after storing it. And here you see crassula. And the bottom left is actually a jade plant. That is the most popular crassula that is available, but there are others, some uprights and whatnot, that have some interesting leaves. And I think what it is about succulents that I enjoy so much is the texture that they offer. Their leaves are so plump and full, and whether they be an upright or growing from a rosette, they offer us all sorts of texture and colorations. And here you can see a selection of aloe. We're probably all familiar with the aloe that is the second one in from the left. We use that. I keep one always in my kitchen because I'm not a very good cook and I tend to burn myself a lot. So the aloe plant is a good solution to my dumb burns, I will call them. I can nearly break off a stem and rub that sticky little sap onto the burn, and it will reduce the inflammation and the irritation of that. But aloes tend to also be rather spiky. They can be in a rosette or they can be upright, but they're very unusual, and they also have some great markings too. And then you have your jungle cacti. As I mentioned earlier, you have your your Christmas cactus, your Thanksgiving cactus, your Easter cactus. Sometimes it's only defined by the color of the flower, but they do tend to grow seasonally, or they tend to bloom seasonally at those times of the holiday, which is where they get their names from. In the center, you can see a night blooming cereus. A night blooming cereus is a very long jungle sort of cacti. It actually throws a stem off that can be, it can be over 10 feet high. I have one growing here in my office that is, the stem is like 6 inches, because it's 6 feet. They actually attach themselves to trees and then crawl around the tree. Now, the nice thing about a night blooming cereus is that it blooms one day at night and then it's gone. So you will see it creating a bloom, but then it will miraculously open and close in one night. And it literally is about 8 inches in diameter and extremely fragrant. So if you can get a piece of night blooming cereus from one of your friends, I highly recommend that you do that, because it's an interesting plant. And I just love that one day of the month when it flowers. Here is sedum. Now, sedums are a type of succulent that many of them can be grown outdoors in our climate. On the upper left, you have the autumn joy, which has succulent leaves. And then in the early fall, late September, it actually blooms and has these beautiful pink flowers covering the top of it. And then you have the other sedums like the lemon chartreuse one in the lower left-hand corner, and stonecrop up in the upper right corner, that also climbs across the soil and makes a really nice bedding plant for you. So again, those can be grown outdoors. And some of the sedums you actually can move inside in the summer. I enjoy this golden sedum so much that I actually did bring it inside and enjoyed it all winter long for what it was worth, and then moved it out in the spring, and it did just quite fine. Whoops, I went backwards. Sorry about that. And sempervivum. Sempervivum is also another succulent that can be grown in our area, commonly known as hen and chicks. Here you have the one on the left with the spider webs growing along the top. And you can see how they give off their little babies and everything. You never see a hen and chick. You never see a hen without its chicks. Let's put it that way. So they're great whether you raise them indoors or outdoors, but they can take the cold. And so they're beautiful in island plantings and whatnot. So let's talk a little bit about growing succulents, the care and feeding of same. First off, indoor succulents need very little water. When I think about plants and what our plants need, I try to go back to where they originated from and think about the environment that they were created to live in, and that is native to them. So as I had mentioned earlier, they are grown in arid environments, and therefore they have those built-in reserves to hold the moisture. So what we do not want to do is give them more water than they need, because you can overdrink, and we've even proven it with humans that too much water is not a good thing. You only want to water your succulents after they have dried out, and you also want to make sure that your succulents, whatever you planted them in, has good drainage so that they're never standing in water. The big rule of thumb is do not overwater. Many people that claim they have a brown thumb actually are very, very high nurturers, and they just want to water those plants. And these plants, I mean, you literally can go weeks without watering them and they still will return. I have a 45-year-old, no, excuse me, 50-year-old jade plant. And it is so big now that the leaves actually do shrivel up when I don't water them too much, and I have to water them very slowly. But that shriveling tells me when to water. I don't have to put my finger in the soil to test that. So if anything, withhold water from your succulents rather than give them water. They do need sun, however. They need 4 to 6 hours of sun per day. So if you've got a bright and sunny window, they will be very, very happy there. And if you can get them out in the summer months during our growing season, they'll be even happier because their colors will perk up, and they also will set themselves up for good flowering after they've had a little bit of a rest. So they do adapt well to your bright windows. Some require indirect sun, but you can look at your plants and tell whether they've got too much sun or too little. If the leaves are scorched and look very, very dry, then you are receiving too much too much sun for that plant, and you can pull it back from the sunlight or give it less sun per day. And if the stems become longer between the leaves, that's a good sign that there's not enough sun, that it's actually stretching out and reaching for the sunlight. So, but if you think 4 to 6 hours, your brightest windows, that is where your succulents will be the happiest. Your succulents need good soil. And the soil needs to be a sandy mix. And I like to take shortcuts, so I do oftentimes grow or purchase pre-made soil mixes, and there are cactus mix out there. However, if you want to make your own mix for soil, you can do that with 2 parts potting soil, 1 part sand, and 1 part perlite. I keep a good mix of both regular potting soil and then cacti potting soil, and also orchids, because that's another plant that I like to raise. But I have all 3 of those soils available to me at any time that I need to pot up or propagate. And that's all it is. Just mix them all together. The sand to keep the drainage, and the perlite for just a little bit of water retention. You will want to fertilize your succulents occasionally with all-purpose fertilizer. I use Miracle-Gro. You could add Osmocote to the container if you'd like. And it doesn't need a lot of fertilizer. Twice a year is all that it really needs. It really is a self-sufficient plant. It also needs to rest once a year. You can do that with just neglect. Just withhold water from it and put it in a dark corner and let it stay there for 30 days or something like that. I oftentimes do not put mine in the dark, although they say that's a good thing to do. So to rest them, what you do is you do put them in a cool, dark place, or at least a darker area away from the sun. Withhold water for that time, and that will reward you with more growth and flower production when it's ready to break dormancy. During that time, you want it to be fairly cool. 50 degrees is good. A cool basement, a garage is fine. As long as it doesn't go below 50 degrees, you're good. And fall, if you bring your plants in after summering outside and give them a rest period and pull them out, say in October, you're going to have wonderful winter color and blooming for the winter months. The rest period is over. The plant actually tells you when the rest period is over. You will see new growth starting. If any of you have been pulling out your bulbs and tubers for summer planting, your tender perennials, you've probably seen that they are already sprouting little leaves and whatnot, and doing it in the dark. And succulents do the same thing. When they're ready to wake up, they wake up. And then potting and repotting, this is all part of the gardening cycle, which actually is all part of the wonderfulness of gardening, and what makes people happy is playing with their plants. Keep in mind that succulents do prefer to be pot bound. They like a pot that is just a little bit larger than them, and they can remain in that pot for a good long time. They have a very small root system to begin with. And so by keeping them in a small pot and actually extending their stay in that small pot, it forces most of the growth to be above ground or above the soil line, which is your succulents themselves. When you are potting, you do want to select something that has drainage. And if it has a drainage hole in it, you can cover that with a stone or I keep pieces of broken terracotta around to do that. You just want it to cover. Water should be able to drain out of it, but you don't want soil to drain out that hole. So that's the purpose of covering it. Then you'll want to, you've got your pot that's just a little bit bigger than your succulent. You put in some stones to cover the drainage holes. You'll want to fill that container with 1/3 of potting soil, that potting mix I mentioned earlier, and make a depression in the center so that you can insert the plant in. You do want just the root to be below soil level, like most of our plants enjoy just being potted right up to the, just above their level of roots. And then you want to water your plant in so it's totally saturated, and then you let it dry, totally dry, before you water it. And you can oftentimes go 2 and 3 weeks without watering these plants. But again, remember, dryness is good for them. As long as they've got water in the stems, they're going to be able to take care of themselves. So now you can care for them, but let's learn about how to make more of them so that you can increase the size of your garden and also have some extras to give away to some friends and family. It's really easy to do. There's 3 different propagation methods that are used for succulents. One is from leaf starts, and I can show you that when I'm done sharing the screen because I had a few of my succulents drop leaves as I was moving them around. Another is from stem cuttings and also from offsets. Now, just about every succulent can be started using these 3 methods. So it's really, your choice and how you want to do that. But I'm going to take you through each of the different propagation methods. The first thing you need to do is you need to have a dirty perlite mix. So what is dirty perlite? Dirty perlite is 1 part potting soil and 3 parts perlite. And perlite is that white pea size, gravel size that you see in your potting soil. Again, that allows for good drainage and doesn't compress against the very fragile roots of a succulent. You'll also need small pots. Egg cartons will do. And you can even use trays. I use saucers from terracotta pots. You can use bread pans. You can use anything that is low and narrow for starting your succulents. You'll need a knife to cut some of your succulents away from its mother plant. And of course, you need a source of your succulents. But the nice thing is they're always producing babies. So you'll have lots to propagate from. So first we'll start with leaf starts. And here you can see leaves that have come off. This looks like an echeveria plant. One of them could be a cressula, but you want to collect those leafy parts. They will fall off randomly, or you can pick them off if you need to increase your propagation. And then let them dry for a few days to callus. I will just throw them down on the counter, put them in a little saucer. I have some on my desk right now that came off earlier, but they need to callus where they were separated from the mother plant. And after a few days, that callus will set up, and then you can insert that base of your leaf into your small pot with your dirty perlite mixture. You want to water it well after you've gotten your leaves in, and then only water when dry. You will also, in the next scene, you'll see little flowerets rooting at the base of the stem. And when those reach a good size, you can remove them from the little leaf that they originated from and pot up. Again, succulents like to be pot bound, so look for small pots or plant multiples in a pot all at the same time. And here you can see some echeveria leaves that are being started on a windowsill. And on the right, aren't these darling, these little succulent plants that grow up, and they're right now they're about a half an inch in diameter, but they actually will fill out and grow to be sometimes 6-8 inches in diameter. But I just think they're adorable how they start off. And stem cuttings, again, all of the succulents that have this, it is your choice of how you do this. But you want to remove a portion of the stem and that has a few joints and a few leaves on it. You want to remove the leaves that are close to the bottom of the stem, and then again, let them callus. That's really important for all propagating. You want them to callus over before you try to place them into a growing medium. Once they have calloused over, then you're going to put them into that dirty perlite mixture. And one thing about a stem cutting is you want to make sure that you plant it in the direction it's growing. So if you've cut your plant into, say, thirds, you don't want to turn it upside down because you're not going to have good results. So you just kind of take note of when you are cutting your stems, which direction they came from, so that you know that you are planting them in the pot in the correct way. And then water well, and then sparingly, just as the aftercare of the leaf cuttings and the normal care of succulents. So here you can see some stem cuttings that have started to mature on the left side. You can see that there's a root system here. Sometimes I will even have leggy succulents that have grown up and some of their leaves have fallen off and it gets very leggy. I'll actually cut that off from the base plant and then stick, like an inch of it into the soil line after it's calloused, and I've got a whole new plant again. But anyway, you can see here the roots forming on the base of it. And here is one that is totally without any leaves. And so that makes it more important that you know which direction you cut it from the host plant so that you get it in the soil the right way. Over here, another favorite of mine is to look at succulents. They actually leach little flowerets. Your stem, as the leaves fall off, they can actually grow those little flowers for you, and you can simply cut them off and put them into a dirty perlite mixture, and you have new plants. And here you can see a photo of the plant and how you can take those cuttings and put them into, here you can make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 plants, and then you still have the 7th one that will continue to grow. And then you have offset plants. These little dangling things, they are just so cute, and I find them in my containers. So kind of like a sort of like a hen and chicks. When you have a hen and chicks that you've grown outside, you'll notice the little baby pups all alongside it, and this is a way that other offset plants will grow as well. And you can merely lift them out of your off your plant and pot them up into new small containers. So we do that by separating the pups from the plant, again, letting them callus, placing them in that dirty soil, and then repotting them when you see several strong shoots appear. You need to have patience for these plants. I mean, they will grow well, but it may take a year for that little baby pup to reach the size of the mother plant. So I just want you to know that. But it's fun to watch and to see them grow and say, there's my babies and I started them, and soon they're going to be all grown up. So offset plants or bonus plants are also available for you to propagate. Here on the left, you can see an aloe vera, and it's got several host plants that are growing at the base. Again, you can merely cut those pups and do the same planting method that I've been talking about, letting them callus and then planting them in that dirty perlite mixture. And in the center here, you can see the other method of pups being developed that I was trying to explain, how they sort of climb across your soil like hen and chicks. And then here you can see an aloe vera, another aloe that is producing pups as well. Really, really fun to see all these little babies come to fruition. Sometimes we have pests. I wish we didn't, but sometimes we have pests. So I'm going to talk to you about some IPM strategies that you can use. Pests that you might get on succulents are whitefly, mealybugs, spider mites, and scale. I would say after living with succulents for decades, that mealybugs are really the only thing that bothers my succulents. And that's in that left-hand corner. Again, if your plant is stressed, that's when you will pests might invade it. If your plant is cared for well and that you only water it when it needs water, and you're giving it good sunlight and everything, it tends to take care of itself. But if it gets stressed and maybe left to be dried out too long, or been put with other plants that have been infected, you're going to collect these pests. Not difficult to take care of. Neem oil, readily available in your nurseries and your local garden departments, or pyrethins will take care of most of your insect damage by simply applying it to the damaged plant. I use alcohol and regular rubbing alcohol and Q-tips for my mealybugs, because mealybugs, that white that you see of mealybug is actually a protective covering. The bug is inside, so you have to break that that protective covering down to remove the bug. There's not thousands of them like whitefly or spider mites, so they're easily to control. If you're looking, if you see a mealybug in the joint structure of your plant and you take care of it immediately, and then continue to look for mealybugs along the way, you will not have a problem with them. Insecticidal soap is another way to control any insects you might have. But remember that they do not like to be sprayed. You can apply it with a cloth or something, but the spraying actually is where they're evaporating water and it's taking it in. So we do not want to play with that process of growing. There are some systemic insecticides out there. I can't pronounce that. Imidacloprid or acephate. They're out there, but look for the labels in the nursery, and your plant department person will be able to help you. Follow your instructions carefully. I do my best with insecticidal soap and alcohol. Again, if you keep your plants healthy, you will not have many pest situations. And luckily, most of them do not like succulents because they can't get anything. So now the fun part, designing with succulents. You'll want to select a container. The best containers for succulents are those with a narrow depth. You can see in all of these pictures, all of them have a narrow depth. Again, they don't have a big root system. They do need to have drainage, and if the container you've chosen does not have drainage, you can add drainage by adding a layer of pebble, and I'll talk about that in another slide. Also, a wide surface to your container is really great, especially if you're combining more than one succulent together, which is really the way that I like to display succulents and care for them. So that wide surface, that narrow depth, and drainage are all that you need to consider in your container. You can make wonderful mosaics out of dish gardens. You can use them in vertical gardens. You can use them in areas where you've got things that are hard to grow, hanging gardens. You can group your pots. And I'm going to show you all sorts of ideas to hopefully inspire you to create your own mosaic gardens. So you've got your container, then you get to select your plant, and this is where the fun begins. Here you can see a nursery that has set out their displays, and I've seen that they're fully stocked. I've been out to a few nurseries already this season, and they have plenty of succulents available. In fact, I asked one of my granddaughters to join me in hunting for my annuals this year, to be my runner, if you will. And she fell in love with the escheverias there. She's like, can I have one of those? It looks like a lotus plant. So I'm delighted that my grandchildren are interested in this gardening. But anyway, you want to look for composition of color, texture. You'll want to combine your plants with similar growing needs. So a jungle cactus, like your Thanksgiving cactus, your Christmas cactus, should not be planted in the same container as a cacti or something that grows in an arid area. Those that require more water, you want to pot up separately from the others, but it's typically very easy to not confuse them. Um, and then you're going to be wanting to look for things with different, especially the texture. You want to choose things that have good color and look well with each other or contrast well with each other. I just fit in this little slide today as I was updating because I wanted to point out some of the wonderful benefits of succulents is after they've had that rest of theirs that we talked about, look at the beautiful blooms that they throw off. Just gorgeous. And their colors are brilliant. And it just thrills me when I see that it's all working its magic and doing its thing. So now for some inspiration. Here's a couple of miniature gardens. And these on the left, you can see a grouping of plants where they've got an individual succulent in each of the containers, and then they've grouped them together. I'm trusting that it's near a sunny window. I don't see a shadow in front of them, so I'm assuming that it is. Now, if you're really into miniature and you don't want your babies to grow up, you can actually save your corks and drill out a little bit of an area, fill it with some potting soil and put your little baby succulents in that. And these were held up on a magnet on a sheet of metal by just simply gluing a magnet onto the back of the cork. So I just think it's just so much fun to be creative with how you're displaying things. But this little grouping of corks really caught my eye. On the left here, you see this alphabet here. These are readily available in like a Michael's, a Hobby Lobby. They have done a lot for developing containers for your succulents. Very, very narrow depth. But look at how all these textures work together. And there is a combination of Crassula and Echeveria in there. I don't know if you can make them out. I don't know how advanced you are in your succulent knowledge, but I do see the varieties in there. And that's the fun of it. You see the little leaves and then the broad leaves, and that's what makes it all so interesting. And then on the right, this looks like it's something out of Star Trek or something that might be up in the Mars mission right now. These little cacti with those brilliant blooms on the top of them, and also their little pups and the Mickey Mouse ears and everything. Very, very friendly. But notice how narrow the depth is on this container. It just really talks about, you do not need large containers for these. Here you can see a couple of hanging gardens. The one on the left makes me want to tell you about a Pinterest. Perhaps you are a Pinterest user. I am, but in all the talks that I do, I try to create a Pinterest board relative to the subject. So if you are in Pinterest, you can go there and Google stunning succulents. You'll probably reach my board. But if not, you'll reach a lot of other succulents. But this DIY succulent ball is one such item I would have in my Pinterest board for you. And you could merely go there and click on it and get all the instructions on how to make that succulent ball, which, as I look at it, is two inverted hanging wire baskets joined together and then planted with soil in the center, and then your succulents are inserted into it. Very easy to do. On the right is actually a hanging plant from last summer in our garden where I combined the succulent with a couple of other plants that didn't require a lot of moisture. So it grew quite nicely in that container with them. More hanging. On the left, this cactus, not cactus, this plant or succulent rather is what we call a donkey's tail, burro's tail. They're wonderful because they will creep and fall over any hanging garden. There's actually a shop in Hudson, New York that has a 65-year-old Burroughs tail in their shop window that is just magnificent. It is so large. I used to have one that was 8 feet long in many years ago, and I'm not sure what happened to it, but I have got a few now that are coming along nicely. But they are wonderful to cascade over your containers. On the right, a a wire hanging planter was inverted and filled with soil, and they put the echeveria around the top dome, as you see there, and then they used a dichondra, which is another, it's an annual plant for us, to grow as a tail coming out of that. I think it kind of looks like a sea urchin to me, but really fun. Vertical gardens are also another way that succulents display well. You'll want to pack your succulents tightly together. And if they're going to be hung or suspended vertically, I always suggest that you hold the soil in place using either a cocoa mat or chicken wire, just something to hold the soil back from when you're watering it being pushed out in away from the container. And if you do have indoor hanging gardens, you'll want to be sure to protect your walls. If the container has any perspiring or anything, you do not want to damage your walls. I actually have one that I'm going to be showing you after this slide that I'll wait to tell you what I was going to tell you when I get to that slide. How's that? Here's some other examples of hanging gardens. Little pots simply suspended together, grouped together. All that was done was tying the twine around the lip of the container and then using different lengths of the twine to suspend them that way. This little string of, I think that string of pears actually is one of those that grows great in a hanging container. The center one, you can see a very large vertical garden, and they've actually used chicken wire to hold back the soil there, and you can see them all growing. Again, it's got to be near a sunny window, but it does well. And here is a beautiful mosaic put together with all the bluish tones and the chartreuse tones layered into a very fanciful pattern. Okay, and this is the vertical garden I was going to tell you about. This is a vertical garden that I have in my home. On the right, you can see it hanging in my kitchen window. And I don't know if you can notice behind it, but I do have some clear contact paper on the wall, and that just protects it from any moisture that might reach back to the wall and therefore protects the wall. But then in the summer months, I move it outside and it becomes my door wreath, if you will. And here you can see it at my front entrance, along with a container that's commanding all the view. Sorry about that, but there that succulent enjoys all the sun of the morning sun and all the rain that comes its way, and it just really flourishes out there during those few months that it sits out there. And here you can see an example of the jungle cactus, or the night blooming cereus. I told you that it can throw off a stem that is 6 to 8 feet long. Actually, this has now been moved because we're doing renovations in the master bath. I've actually moved it into the office that I'm coming to you from. And one of the things I've decided is it can grow here, and I'm going to put some fishing line up on my ceiling so that this cactus can grow across the ceiling. I have a bright sunny window, so it's going to be perfect. And here you can see one of those gorgeous blooms that happened and then died in the same event. So you only get about 6 hours of this flower, but boy, when it flowers, it's beautiful and so fragrant. And I just kind of like that jungly look climbing all around. Glass gardens are another way to work with succulents. The important thing with that is because they can get humid is you need to have a wide opening in your container with your when you are planting them with succulents, and also they don't have drainage. So here you can see in this top left picture the layer of pebbles that are on the bottom of those containers. So I do, you want to add about an inch of those mini pebbles. And then I actually cut a circle of weed cloth to fit the container. And I put that weed cloth over the pebbles so that when I do water the succulents, the soil does not penetrate down into the stone. So it looks decorative all the time. And also that's where the excess water will go if you have a tendency to overwater. So again, you want to make your dish gardens with your succulent soil mix, whether you've made your own or you've bought a commercial mix. Make sure that that opening is large enough for air circulation, and always make sure that it is dry before you water it. And you should have good results. If you like groupings and you like propagating and you've managed to create many more babies for you, you want to consider grouping them together. Always in grouping, secret of interior design really is doing things in unequal numbers. So 1, 3, 5, 7, think about that rather than 2, 4, 6, 8. They do really like those uneven numbers when you are grouping things. Vary the heights. When I go back, you can look at the succulents that I have behind me, but the important thing is you want to make it interesting so that things are not all at the same height. The one on the right works successfully because it's a theme there. They're using the same container and they've just changed out the collection that they have propagated into it. And upper right-hand corner, you can see that succulents have been planted in grains and coffee beans, but they're not really. The container was actually filled with the grains, and then a very small container for your aloe plant was potted up and set in there, and then the coffee beans were added around the perimeter of the pot to conceal that pot. And that's how you make a container like that. Fun to do. I love to be creative with my containers, and there isn't anything that I'm not willing to try. So I hope you will too. Here's some example of more dish gardens. Over on the left is one of those fountains or bird baths, if you will, that has become a succulent garden. On the right, you can see it, this urn has been planted up and looks just beautifully. Whether you do it indoors or move it outdoors, it fills all of its needs in those locations. And here on the right side is a very interesting mix of textures, broad base leaves, smaller leaves. You've got some spillers coming down, the string of pearls that's falling down, and you have some uprights in there as well. Here's some more ideas for succulent gardens. On the left, you can get really creative with how you finish it off. Here they've used some stones to sort of make a mosaic where they have put their plants in the corners of the container, and then they've made it look like they've got a white corner and then a natural area of stones on the left. Over here in the center, you've got some cacti that have been planted and topped with some stones, and that roughness of the stones just adds even more interest. In fact, there are some cacti that grow like that and really look like those stones. So sometimes I have to look quite twice to know what I'm looking at. And here on the right, how cute is this to just use your milk containers, your creamers, and your gravy boat and fill them with your succulents. Remember to include your drainage, and they'll be just fine in those unique things. These are a couple more of my succulent mosaics that I have put together over the years. And the one on the left, you can see that it's very, very colorful. And those colors are not prevalent during the winter months. It tends to lose its colorness and become more green. But when you do move those succulents out and they can enjoy all of an abundance of sun and fresh air, they will take on that deep color and perform nicely for you. Word of caution when you have your plants outside, be aware of rainy weather. I don't leave them just outside to all of the conditions of the weather. If it's going to be raining for several days, I tend to like tuck my succulents under a chair, a coffee table, something so that they do not float away with all of the rain. I mean, what did we have last week? 5 inches of rain in 4 days. So definitely you do not want all of that water. And if it does get that much water, like you forget or you weren't home, dump it out. Just kind of lift it and let it drain out a little bit, and you'll be fine. Let it dry out before you water it again. Fairy gardens are a wonderful place to use succulent planting to define nature. You can make whole villages and cities and little forts and whatnot using miniature plants, and the succulents are perfect for them. And then embellish them with little bits of furniture and broken pottery, and just have fun with it. And if you've got little kids, whether you're a teacher, a grandparent, or a young mother, these are always fun projects to do with your children. And how about this? The ultimate tiny house. I mean, for those of you that really have ambition and whatnot, I just came across this one today as I was updating. I was like, oh my, this is just amazing that somebody had the time and the vision to put this together. So I thought it was fun, and I just wanted to include it in today's talk. And we'll finish up with this. She really needed a hug from someone who understood her. And that is that. Now we've got time for questions. So if you have any questions, you can put them into the chat box. I want to give credit to where I have gotten a lot of my information. World of Succulents is a website out there that you can visit, and it has all sorts of visuals of the plants, and we'll talk to you about the cultivation. There's a bookstore and videos there for you. But if you have any questions or whatnot, you can always reach out to our master gardeners at our office here in Rensselaer County, and also make note of my email, because I'm happy to answer any questions you have too. And always love to see if you put together mosaics or anything. I would love to see what you're doing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that I can bring you back to questions and answer. I see we have a couple. And before we bring them up, I'll just kind of show you the succulents I have behind me. This little gal, she actually becomes a redhead in the summer. This is actually a cacti. At the end of the summer, after she's had a little bit of a rest, she'll get little red flowers on it. And before I turned white during COVID, I was a redhead, so I kind of identified with my redhead lady there. And here is my ruffled echeveria that I coveted for so long. I bought it when it was probably this size, and you can see that it's growing quite nicely. Again, the nice thing is they just don't need much help at all, and they are very self-maintaining. So does anybody have any questions for me?
You see the couple that are there, Denise? There's how do you water a vertical garden?
Good question. Excellent question. Actually, when it's outside on my front door, that one I actually take off the door sometimes and lay it down so that the rain can get into the tiny little holes where the plant comes out of. Most vertical containers, and they do make products available, and mine is in one of those. They generally have holes at the top so your water can go down and it will actually trickle down to the bottom of the vertical container. I usually do take it off the wall and bring it to the sink for its watering though. Let's see. Have a hen and chicken with sedum terracotta bowl. Any idea how to combat probably squirrel? Well, if I had that answer, I would use it because I had this really pretty thing that I had made with a pot, and it made it look like a flower pot inside another container, and it looked beautiful. And then somebody took the big succulent right out of it. I'm assuming it's a deer because it was up too high, but it could have been a squirrel. If you're if you feed the squirrels away from your hen and chicks and they are totally satisfied, they may be okay, but feed them away from your hen and chicks so that they're at a different part of your garden. Or keep them, well, if you're using them in your landscaping bed, that's one thing. But if they're in a container, you could put them up in a safer spot, like on your deck or something like that. How do you know when it's time for a large pot as they grow? Amy, they grow so slow. You could probably have plants for 6 years in a pot before they need it. But if you see that the soil is maybe shrinking away from the side of the container, that may be a sign that the roots are getting very big and pushing the soil out of the container. That would be one way to identify that it needs another container. If it also is using the water, if it's dry most of the time, even after you've watered it, that again tells you that the root system is very large and probably would need to be transplanted. But only go up one size in the container because they do like to be pot bound. Any other questions? Okay, wow. I hope that you've all learned a little bit more about succulents and maybe become as much of a fan of them as I have become. And I just want to wish you a wonderful growing season and enjoy. Happy gardening, everybody.
Oh, thank you, Denise. Thank you so much for always sharing your knowledge with us. You know, it's always great. And I just want to let everybody know if you came late or you forgot something and wanted to take notes, we did record it. So it will be up on the library's YouTube station, as well as the other talks that Denise has done for us. That your repurposed garden objects has gotten many, many, many views, Denise.
It's amazing what technology, you go back and you see those views, and it's amazing how people do tend to find them. So
Yes.
it's nice that they're out there. It's a nice resource. So thanks for recording that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks so much, Denise.
All
And thank you
right.
everyone for attending, and hopefully we'll see everyone again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a nice night.